Assalamu alaikum dear students and welcome to our lecture series of advanced research methods. I am Farhan Sarwar and in today's lecture we are going to discuss the proposal development process. Let's take a look at the outline of today's lecture, what and why of a research proposal, general structure of a research proposal, types and limitations of research proposals, the request for proposal, resource allocation and budgets. Before we discuss the types and structure of a research proposal, let's take a quick look at the research process. So we discussed in previous lecture that every research is related to some organizational decision making if it is an applied research or a business research, or if it's the research of a pure academic purpose, that is a pure research, then maybe there are some gaps in literature or some shortcomings in existing literature which the researcher wants to explore and find the answer and contribute to literature. After that, there are research questions that are generated from the problems, from the existing problems, and then there is a literature review to identify that what previous work has been done in our topic of interest, followed by research design, data collection and preparation, data analysis and interpretation, and there's an important aspect of every research that we need to report it somehow, that what we have done, how we have done, and what are our results. And finally, the results or the research that we conduct can be used for either a managerial decision at organizational level, or it can be published and presented in some conference, or one can also attain a research degree as a result of concluding a research. However, there is an important part of research process, that is research proposal. It often precedes many steps of the research, and for that reason we are going to discuss it now. As you can see in this diagram, often after a research question there is a process of generating a document which is called research proposal. After the research proposal, or with along with the research proposal, comes the budget and value assessment of every research. As you will see later on, that this budget and value assessment is often the part of the research proposal document. Organizations need to see that the research that they are going to carry on or carry out, is it beneficial for their organization. The investment that they are going to make into research, is it going to benefit, or the value of the research is more than the investment. If that is not the case, organizations may make decisions without the research or use some other intuitive or systematic approach to make decisions. There can be a revision in the question such that management comes up with a more practical question that is more specific, and then generate a new research proposal and evaluate the value of the research. However, if the budget and research design is approved, then we move to the next step of research design. And often in if we are interested to hire some external researchers, then we may issue request for proposal. In research, a research proposal is essentially a guiding document or a roadmap which shows that from where to begin our journey of research, and what is our destination, or what is the problem to which we need to find a solution. It also outlines the methods that we are going to adopt to get there. In addition, a well prepared research proposal also includes potential problems that a researcher may face while doing the research, and also outlines an alternative solution to solving those research based problems. Of course, before the research is started and either a data collection or analysis portion or investigation portion is reached, research proposal allows to make some decisions in the early phase of the research. Mostly, it is a written document, and of course, it is preferred that a research proposal should be written because it set out the outlines and benchmark to follow. So, both the sponsor of the research and the researcher can refer to that written document later on and see whether each one of them is deviating from what was planned or not. As you know, and as you have studied in your previous courses, that planning is important part of the managerial function. And if a plan is good, if there is a plan which is executable, then there is a more probability that the project is going to succeed. And of course, a poor plan can always lead to a failure. So, what is the purpose of the research proposal? First of all, it presents the management question to be researched and what is the importance of that management question. Secondly, a research proposal discusses the efforts or the research efforts of others who have already worked on the related management question or the management issue that we are going to investigate in our research. Third, a research proposal suggests what type of data is necessary for solving that managerial issue, how that data will be gathered, how that data will be analyzed to find some solution or to test some hypothesis, and how we can interpret and present that data. So, in that way, the proposal is beneficial for both the sponsor, who are the sponsors of a research. Every research has a sponsor in one form or another. A student researcher may have a class instructor as a sponsor. A PhD or master researcher may have a supervisor as a sponsor or the department as the sponsor. In a corporate setting, whether the research is being done in house by a research department or an external contract is given to a research firm, the management is the sponsor of the research. Similarly, other types of sponsors like universities, governments, corporate sponsored, they use the research proposal as a document to evaluate the work or to award the research to some external firm or many firms to decide between many firms. The proposal allows the research sponsor to assess the researcher as well as the researcher's design. For instance, if a company has to choose between competing proposal, so they can make a selection when if they can find the quality of the proposal. If a proposal is poorly planned or poorly written or poorly organized, this is the time that the sponsors can make decision what or whom to choose. Similarly, for a researcher, the proposal is very beneficial because they have got a document in their hand which is approved by some authority, and they can use that document, they can refer that document to carry on rest of their research process. So as we can see that we can use a research proposal to win the grants, and as a student when you will enter your professional life and either you plan to pursue your higher studies, you always have chance to get a grant or funding for your research projects, because as we will see in the budgeting section that research is not cheap and we need some investment, we need some sponsors to carry out research, especially the research that are carried out at large scale. So the process of proposal development is quite iterative, that you continue to do it until your sponsor is satisfied. Let's take a look at a general structure of a research proposal. In the beginning, there is often an executive summary, or what we can say an abstract of a research proposal, which basically gives an quick overview or the tour of what we expect to study or expect to read in the remaining research proposal in detail. So it gives a chance to grasp the essential of the proposal in just one quick read. Further on, there is a problem statement, and this section is basically to convince the examiner or evaluator or the sponsor to continue reading the rest of the proposal. So at this point, when we are preparing a research proposal, we need to grasp the attention of the decision makers that this is the real problem that we have identified, either from the practical aspect or managerial issues, or we identify some gaps, some relevant gaps in the existing literature, or some contradictory results in the existing literature that we need to investigate. And of course, at this point, if the reader is convinced that you have identified the relevant problem statement, he or she may continue reading the rest of the proposal. Otherwise, it can be rejected at this point. As we discussed earlier, the problem statements that are too broad are basically not much relevant, and they should be more focused on, especially more focused to the sponsors relevant management dilemmas or research questions. Of course, research questions or objectives are very important part of the problem statement, because after you have defined the managerial issue or managerial problem and detailed it or outlined in the research proposal, the objectives will clearly tell us that what are we planning to do or what questions are we planning to answer. And of course we have gone through this and of course we discussed this topic in the previous lecture. The objectives can be also converted into investigative questions, which is mostly relevant to a causal study, or it can be further uh, transformed into hypothesis, that is also always comes after the literature review. And literature review is also an important part of a research proposal. This section examines the recent or relevant studies which are done pertinent to the topic that we are investigating. Literature review can also be done through secondary sources like company data, industry reports, that can act for the basis for the study that we are proposing. And we will discuss this literature review in upcoming lectures. How to carry out a literature review, what is the significance of literature review, the sources from which we can get the literature, and what is the writing style that we should adopt when we are doing a literature. Then comes the portion when we discuss the importance or the benefit of the study. With every research proposal, we need to explain that how the study that we are going to conduct is beneficial, and especially the sponsor should understand that the study we are going to conduct is beneficial for them and how it is going to solve their managerial issues. The research design is an elaborated part of a research proposal. Often it is not as lengthy, but it has a lot of subsection. It describes what we are going to do in technical terms. It provides information on the type of study that we are going to conduct, the sample selection and size, data collection method, instruments that we are going to use to acquire the data, the procedures that we are going to follow. Often there is an elaborated ethical requirement portion, and contemporarily the ethical aspect is very much emphasized and often required to get an ethical approval from some uh, review board or committee. The acceptance of a research proposal also relies on this if the researcher has fulfilled the ethical requirements. Often there some research proposals also have more than one recommendations for research design, and the researcher can also discuss that why a particular method is chosen and why the others were rejected. Then comes the proposed data analysis portion. Of course, we do data analysis when we are done with a data collection, but at this point we are only making our recommendations. So in this section, you only describe how the researcher proposed to handle the data and why the particular data analysis technique, either it is a quantitative data analysis or qualitative data analysis, why the researcher have chosen that particular technique. The objective of this section is to assure the sponsor or the management committee who is assessing the research proposal that you are following some correct assumptions and using a theoretically sound data analysis procedure. We also need to highlight that how we are going to present our results. So upon finishing this section, the evaluator of the research proposal would be able to discuss. So, upon finishing this section, the evaluator of the research proposal should be able to go back to the problem statement and the managerial questions and find out if each of the managerial question and research objective covered with this result. Did we find the answer to all of these by adopting this method? In this portion and in previous portion, one should also specify the type of data that is the researcher going to obtain and the interpretation that will made from that analysis. Often some research proposals also highlights the qualification of the researcher. This section begins with qualification, and if there are more than one researchers or investigators, then of course the principal investigator is always there. It's important to highlight the professional research competence of the investigators, which includes their research experiences, their academic degrees, whether they hold membership of some business and technical societies, and of course their relevant research and managerial experience. So often, and keep in mind that the structure that we are discussing right now is comprehensive. Often some of the portions may be missing, as we will see in later slides, that some research proposals are quite elaborative and some are quite concise depending upon the type and the scope of a research proposal. Then comes an important section, especially for those research proposals which are for the corporate sector and also for some large scale scientific studies. The budget. The budget should be presented in a form that is requested by the sponsor or that is easily understandable to them. We need to know the timeline of the research that we are going to follow. Um there it highlights the major phases of the project because it breaks down the project into different phases, the timetable, the milestone, that how we know that a particular phase of the research is completed. For example, a research proposal can be divided into, as you can see in this Gantt chart, a particular researcher who is doing some master's degree developed this Gantt chart. So the first thing was to identify the research area. To they allocated one, he or she allocated 1 month to it. Then formulate research questions, formulate research strategies, write research proposal. As you can see, this Gantt chart highlights different phases of the research and what time the researcher has allocated to it. Often research proposal also highlights the facilities or the special facilities that are required um, for a particular research. These can be described in details at this particular time, because later on, if you have not included or asked your sponsor to provide these facilities, it may be difficult to acquire them. So, if that particular research, a sophisticated computer system for data analysis, that should be mentioned, and obviously the budget and facility section overlaps. Often some corporate research proposal also highlights the project management or the master plan with which the research will be carried out. This master plan that is required for the complex project often includes the research team, the organization of the research team, the hierarchy, the management procedure and controls that the research team is going to use to execute the research plan. Some examples of the management and technical reports that have been generated by the research team previously, some financial and legal responsibility, and the competence of the research team. Often this section is highlighted with the help of tables and charts, because they are very helpful to present the master plan. It also highlights some minute details, such as printing facilities, clerical help, information processing capabilities, copyrights is an important aspect, and the standard operating procedures SOPs with which the researcher and sponsor are going to collaborate, the frequencies of the payment that the researcher expects are also covered in this master plan of project management. Any other financial responsibilities and any other managerial competencies can also be included in this project management section. Bibliography, of course, all the material that we have referred, either it's a textbook, a document, a report, a research paper. Bibliography is important because we need to tell that from where we have got that information. There are different format of the bibliography we will discuss later on in literature review chapter, such as we can use the APA format, the MLA format, or any other format that is required by the sponsor. Appendices, there are some things that are part of the appendices. For example, glossary. It's the section in which the terms and definitions are defined. Some acronyms, if they are used, are also defined in the glossary, and then we can have the measurement instrument. If we have adopted some questionnaires, or if we have designed some techniques to measure the data, or we have a detail about a focus group, we can also mention in this glossary section. And other details include uh, such as resume of the researcher, profiles of the firm, some detailed budget reports, and other lengthy description that does not fit within the main body of the document. We can classify research proposal as internal or external. Internal proposals, which are often carried out by the staff specialist or the research department within a firm, are simpler documents. They are less complex. They have less number of pages. They can either be 1 to 3 page as the sample that is provided in your notes, and often it has less components as compared to an external proposal. External proposal can be solicited or unsolicited. If we say a proposal is solicited, it means that it was generated as a result of a request for proposal, and there were many competitors who presented their proposal for a particular research grant or a contract. On the other hand, an unsolicited proposal represents a suggestion by a researcher that we have already hired. They're often, depending upon the scope of the research and the funding, they can be quite detailed. So, we can define the research proposal as the types of research proposal by multiple classification. For example, if you look at the figure, we can have internal and external management proposals, and in the external we can even have government sponsored, then we can have academic proposals, and in academic proposal we can have a research term paper, something that an undergraduate student would do, and then we have a master's thesis, then we have a doctoral thesis. And as you can see, a research term paper is the least complex of all. So we have a complexity scale, and then we have some exploratory study which are more complex. If exploratory contract research for an external uh, researcher is a bit more complex, small stage scale studies up to the large scale contract research. And in here also come a doctoral thesis, which of course is more complex than a master's thesis, which is of course more complex than a research term paper in academic research. Similarly, in managerial research, we can have large scale contract research often given by the government to investigate topics that are of a national interest sometimes, and they have an implication for large number of people. We can have small scale contract research confined to one industry or one organization. As you can see, that not all the research proposal have these components as we have discussed before. Some are more simpler, such as an exploratory study. We are researching upon a topic that we do not know much about. We can have a problem statement in the proposal, the research objectives, research design, and the schedule. That's a very simple approach. A term paper that is expected from a student can have um, problem statement, research objectives, and bibliography. And but as you can see, for a large scale contract that is often awarded by government, such as HEC awards, research grants, and they expect very detailed study, they are required to have all these components that we discussed a few minutes ago.